Despite how many different cooks are needed to make a successful movie, sometimes just one changed ingredient can make a world of positive difference. And the following 10 movies are all great examples of this. While some other recent failures were so awful that they could only have been saved by starting over altogether, Madam Web, Borderlands, I'm looking firmly at both of you, the movies featured here were not all that far away from being saved. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 10 simple fixes that would have saved terrible recent movies. Number 10, cleaner, give it a bigger budget. The latest Die Hard-esque action flick to arrive could have really been something. In this case, it was Die Hard in Canary Wharf. It was helmed by action legend Martin Campbell and headlined by Star Wars' Daisy Ridley. So that's already a promising combo. And this plot formula is usually pretty good fun, but not this time. Cleaner is, well, pretty bad. And it really feels like a film held back by its evidently low budget. Now, of course, plenty of filmmakers turn out amazing material with scant resources, but things just didn't work out like that here. It's filled with jarringly bad CGI. The film's only famous name other than Ridley, that being Clive Owen, is barely in it despite his presence in the trailers. And most damaging of all, there's barely any actual action. No word of a lie, Ridley's character spends well over half of the movie stuck outside the skyscraper on a cleaning platform, and any actual combat is largely confined to the last 20 minutes. Additionally, the film is barely an hour and a half and feels far too rushed as a result. In this particular case, Campbell & Co. just needed a higher budget in order to really fulfill this project's considerable potential. Look, the film does have some solid ideas, so it definitely could have worked with the right backing, but that it just did not have. Number 9, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Get rid of Kang and make Modok the villain. Kang the Conqueror was widely agreed to be the best thing in this mostly terrible threequel, so it might seem a bit odd to argue that he should have been removed. But yes, he was arguably a great character stuck in the wrong movie, and he should have probably been given the spotlight in a different project. The thing is, Kang essentially hijacked the entire film and overshadowed everyone else in what was meant to be an Ant-Man movie, and he didn't have any connection to Ant-Man anyhow. And also, there was a far more suitable villain right in plain sight: Modok. Let it be immediately said that Modok, who was ultimately made into Kang's comical henchman complete with a ridiculous redemption arc, is arguably the worst MCU villain ever. But he could have worked with better CGI and some rejigged writing. After all, Ant-Man fought him in his first solo outing, so having him as the main villain would have made a lot more sense here. I will never get over that CGI though, never, 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 never. Now, Quantumania did have quite a few other problems, but if they'd saved Kang, who has obviously now been benched thanks to Jonathan Major's criminal charges, for some other movie, and given Ant-Man a weighty showdown against the first supervillain he ever fought, well, that'd definitely have made the film feel like an actual Ant-Man movie and would have gone a long way toward fixing the film's story too. Number 8, Napoleon: Respect the History. Director Ridley Scott has been as blunt as can be in regards to his complete disinterest in historical accuracy. Now, to be fair to him, not all great biopics are historically accurate. Sometimes the real story is pretty mundane, and dramatic license needs to be used to make it a bit more cinematic. Take Argo, for example. In contrast to that film's unbearably suspenseful climax, the real escape went very smoothly, but the true version wouldn't have made for good cinema, would it? That's not the case with Scott's bitterly disappointing Napoleon biopic, though. It is ironic that the film felt like a filmed Wikipedia article, as it was slated for its many historical inaccuracies. And in this case, it would have been beneficial just to follow the actual history. Napoleon Bonaparte is one of the most famous and important people in history. A complicated yet undeniably extraordinary man who inspired an entire nation to follow him. This movie's insistence on depicting him as a petulant tyrant who's terrible at sex and plays second fiddle to his wife Josephine all the way through was quite a strange call, and that is putting it mildly. As was casting Joaquin Phoenix, even though he's at least 20 years too old for the part. He also gave an arguably career-worst performance in the role, didn't he? In this case, sticking to history would have made the film a hell of a lot less disappointing, and it also would have offended fewer people, but try telling Ridley that. Number 7. The Equalizer III. Give it a finale. With The Equalizer III, the third and worst film in an unexpected trilogy, the picture being underwhelming really did come down to just one thing: the finale. The rest of the movie is absolutely solid, with brutal action and a gentle emotional undercurrent running through it. And then, the film gives audiences the finger with one of the most maddeningly anticlimactic action movie finales in recent memory. That's bad enough. But when one considers the climaxes of the previous two offerings, the first had one of the greatest action finales of the 2010s, and the second's island showdown was also seriously cool, well, it seems even worse. This climax is nothing more than a series of short, darkly lit kill scenes that ends just when it's about to get interesting. This was probably done because Denzel Washington is now 70 years old, and therefore not as able to do action scenes like he used to. But that's not really an excuse. They could have done a set piece revolving more around firearms, which would have probably been a bit more doable for him, right? 2 more sequels are apparently in development, but after this, frankly, don't bother. Save your time and money. Number 6. The Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Get rid of the entire final act. Staying on the subject of bad final acts, The Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is, simply put, structurally broken. The film seems to reach a natural endpoint when its iteration of The Hunger Games concludes. But it then turns out that we're only at the end of Act 2, and there's a whole other section of the movie that goes on for the best part of an hour. So that was already bad enough. Worse still, this final act fails to definitively explain why Coriolanus Snow, here played by Tom Blythe, became the cruel and ruthless leader he was in the original films, where he was played by the late great Donald Sutherland, of course. Thanks to these structural and narrative issues, this ended up being the worst Hunger Games film to date by a clear mile, with even the divisive Mockingjay Part 2 soaring high above it. How to fix it then? Well, simple, just end the story where it felt like it was gonna bloody end. The film's writers could have definitely found a way to conclude the story of Coriolanus and his love interest Lucy in a shorter time frame. Yes, this wasn't how things played out in the novel, but the novel has been divisive among fans anyhow, so a bit of deviation would not have hurt in the slightest here. People change things during movie adaptations all the damn time. Right then, if you are finding this video about little fixes that would have saved these recent movies quite interesting, then hit that subscribe button down below and you'll get even more What Culture videos just like this one, I promise. Okay, maybe not just like this one, but maybe just as fascinating, okay? I can promise that. Now back to this video. Number 5. The Crow. Make Eric the Crow much, much earlier. A reboot of The Crow was always unasked for, and the development hell this went through suggested a dud long before the movie even arrived. But there was actually an easy fix here. Had this movie bothered to give audiences what they actually came for, it might have been a little more watchable. Viewers came to see Eric/the Crow wreak vengeance upon those who killed him and his beloved girlfriend. But instead, they got a film that's mostly dominated by a beyond cringy love story between Eric and Shelley. And he only becomes the Crow in the last 30 minutes. Ironically enough, once the picture does actually get to the, revenge, it flickers to life a bit. It does, after all, have a really awesome fight scene in an opera house, which hints at an at least okay-ish action film hiding beneath all the emo cringe. It's unlikely that this was ever going to come close to the original, but had the feature been a leaner, action-focused film, then it could have been solid, at the very least. Then it would have probably just been forgotten instead of enduring as one of the most hated movies of 2024. Not sure which is worse, actually. To be remembered for being crap or forgotten for being solid. Number 4. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Replace Helena Shaw. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny has earned the heavy criticism it's received from fans and critics alike. But there are also actually a few good things going for it. No, really. Hear me out. The finale is enjoyably wacky. It's mostly well acted. James Mangold does a solid job as director, and Mads Mikkelsen's villain is rock solid as well. In short, it could have been bearable enough with just one fix. Get rid of Helena Shaw. Shaw is one of the worst film characters in recent memory. An obnoxious, smug, and repulsive individual who never undergoes any sort of arc, and remains the same hateful person from beginning to end. And as for Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who seemed to be doing her best to throw out all the goodwill she earned with Fleabag, she was lucky not to receive a Razzie nod for her performance here. Like, she's normally great, but here, yeah, it just did not work, did it? Look, the character is bad enough on her own. But what makes the film particularly unpleasant is that Indiana Jones himself plays second fiddle to Helena all the way through. At the end, he even asked to be left behind in the past to die. And he only survives because Shaw knocks him out and takes him back while unconscious. Charming. Replacing Shaw with literally anyone else, someone like Salah or Short Round, would have made Dial of Destiny so much more enjoyable, regardless of its other faults. Number 3, Peter Pan and Wendy. Let David Lowery make the film he wanted to make. Peter Pan and Wendy is very much a film at war with itself, trying to be a faithful remake of the 1953 Disney animation, and a darker, more experimental take on the story at the same time, ensuring that it fails to be either. It would appear that the latter is the movie that director David Lowery really wanted to make, folks. The film is said to have been a passion project for Lowery, and when it starts to reimagine the narrative and find new dimensions in the material, that is when it really comes to life. Some of its narrative alterations, such as its deconstruction of the notion of Peter Pan as a hero, are really interesting. Yet the film never quite commits to its intriguing vision, and all too often falls back into being a paint-by-numbers copy of the much better Disney animation. In this case, Disney execs just needed to take a big ol' step back and let Lowery make his movie. Now, that's not to say that it definitely would have been good, but it would have at least felt like the product of one artistic voice making something he really wanted to make. And that way, Peter Pan and Wendy would have felt like a more sincere, admirable venture, regardless of the final outcome. Number 2, Emilia Perez, Do Your Damn Homework. Amelia Perez, a musical about a former Mexican cartel boss who transitions into a woman, is one of the most vehemently hated award season movies of the century, and there is a very good reason for that. It has offended so many people, and the backlash has been largely justified. It's a film set in Mexico that only features one Mexican actor, was shot in France, and has been panned in Mexico due to its failure to treat the country with respect. It depicts Mexico as a crime-ridden hellhole in a wildly retrograde manner, and its exploration of Mexico's issue with crime and missing persons is also dreadful. Discussing this tragic issue through a glitzy musical is bad enough, and to make matters worse, the titular character never faces any sort of comeuppance for their countless murders. And as if all of that wasn't enough, LGBT viewers have also, again deservedly, criticised the film for its depiction of the trans experience. How could all of this have been avoided? Writer-director Jacques Audiard just needed to do his damn homework. Audiard openly admitted to having done little to no research before writing the film, and it definitely shows. Had he taken the time to engage with these subjects respectfully and authentically, then Emilia Perez would have been so much better. There were definitely some good elements in here, such as the directing and some of the performances, so it wasn't a movie beyond saving. Homework would have absolutely helped though. And number 1, Captain America Brave New World. Make it a Hulk movie. Captain America Brave New World has indeed turned out to be the dud that many predicted it would be. And given its troubled production and terrible script, at first glance it might seem like there was no single easy fix. In fact, quite the opposite though, as this was a case of a movie just having the wrong main character. Brave New World should not have been led by Captain America, it should have been led by the Hulk. In all but name, this is a sequel to 2008's The Incredible Hulk, the Marvel Cinematic Universe's mostly forgotten second movie. It features several references to the events of that film. It heavily revolves around Thaddeus Ross / Red Hulk, with Harrison Ford taking over from the late William Hurt. And most notably of all, it features the long-awaited returns of Betty Ross and Samuel Stearns, aka The Leader. If Brave New World had been led by a hero who felt relevant to any of what was going on, it's not like any of those characters have all that much connection to Sam Wilson, right? Perhaps it wouldn't have felt like such a narrative jumble, and maybe it wouldn't have ended up up being one of the all-time worst MCU movies. Audiences have long been clamoring for a second MCU Hulk solo film, and it's a crying shame that all of those potential elements were wasted on this complete mess of a film. You just want to Hulk smash it all and start again.